Imagine an empire not built on land, but on water, where every temple is a mathematical plea to the gods, and every sunrise must be paid for in blood. A city where sacrifice is currency and fear is a system of governance. And then one day, amid omens, eclipses, and fire in the sky, he arrives. No one knows who he is. Maybe a god, maybe a demon, or maybe the one thing even our gods feared. I, Moctezuma, ruler of Tenochtitlan, stood atop my temple and watched the sun freeze. It didn't fall. It didn't burn. It simply stopped. And in that moment, I understood. Either the world fears our city, or it's waiting for us to vanish. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear the story of a city that had no right to exist, and yet became the center of the world. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it? Because time is the only language our gods still speak. I am Moctezuma, 9th Tlatoani of Tenochtitlan, son of the sun and of shadows. I speak not from life, but from stone, because only stone never forgets. My city was not born like others. It was not built by merchants, not conquered by warriors. It was shown to us by the gods. An eagle on a cactus, a serpent in its beak, and a lake without shore, without bottom, without hope. There we became gods. Tenochtitlan, a city where stars rose upon water, where sacrifice measured time, where every stone had a name and every pyramid pointed toward eternity. I grew up among these temples, among books written not with ink, but with hearts. I knew how many steps the sun takes to reach the moon, and how much blood it takes to keep the sky from falling. I was a priest before I was a king, and even with the scepter in my hand, I still listened to the stones, because they spoke of the past, of the future, of something that was coming. I will tell you a story, not mine, my city's, because I did not survive. But the city still lives, in ruins, in scars, in memory. You want to know how it all began? Then listen closely, because the first word was not mine. The first word was written in the sky. The eagle landed. The gods whispered, and we stepped onto the water to build a world no one believed could stand. We did not leave because we wanted to. We left because the god commanded it. Our origin was Aztlan, the land of white herons, endless light, mirror-like waters. No one remembers exactly where it was. And if someone tells you they do, they lie. Because Aztlan is not a place, it is a wound, an exile disguised as prophecy. Historians will tell you Aztlan was likely in what is now northern Mexico, perhaps in the modern states of Nayarit, Sonora, or even southern Texas. But we left not for geography. We left because Huitzilopochtli, our god of war and sun, gave us a sign. The years were around 1100 to 1200 AD. The central valley of what is now Mexico was already thriving. Toltecs, Chichimecas, Tepanecs, Otomi, great peoples with cities, temples, and power. And we were nothing. Every time we tried to settle, they chased us away. When we begged for water, we were given dust. They called us names, thieves, wanderers. Of the 10 tribes who left Aztlan, 9 gave up. Only we, the Mexica, kept walking. Our God whispered through fevered dreams and trembling skies, "Seek the eagle, seek the cactus, seek the serpent, there lies your heart." And so we walked for 40 years, through deserts, through forests, through enemies and plagues. We had no home, we had no name. I was born on that road, and my father once told me, if the god falls silent, watch the earth. If the earth says nothing, watch the sky. But never look behind you. And then one morning we saw it. Amid the Lake Texcoco, surrounded by fog and rot, stood the sign, an eagle, on a cactus, a serpent in its beak. Beneath its talons, our past, and all of us, dropped to our knees. It was swamp. It was death. It was destiny. We called it Tenochtitlan, in honor of the prophet Tenoch, who dreamed this vision long before we saw it. This is where we would build, on water, on hope. This is where the Mexica were born. This is where time began. Water is no foundation for an empire, but we learned to place stone where others saw only mud. In the next chapter, I'll show you how a city rose from a lake and why every temple was a fallen star. Swamps forgive no mistakes, but the gods grant no right to fear. We arrived at a place where nothing was meant to be. Lake Texcoco, vast, shallow, ringed by mountains, muddy shores, thick fog, the stench of rot. This was the center of what is now Mexico, where today stands Mexico City. And here, we would build the center of the world. Have you seen Venice? A city of stone balanced on wooden stilts above water. Tenochtitlan was like that, but centuries earlier. And we did not build for beauty. We built to prove to the gods that we deserved another sunrise. In our belief, the center is not a spot on a map. It is the point where heaven and the underworld meet, a place where time can begin again. And so we began to lay stone on water. How, you ask? That's impossible. Yes, it was. But we were the Mexica, and we had no choice. We drove stakes into the lake bed, wove reed platforms, layered them with mud, and created floating islands called chinampas. On them, we grew not only temples, but maize, beans, squash, life itself. We made swamp fertile. One Spanish chronicler would later write, "A city built on water, with canals like Venice, but larger, with pyramids rising taller than its bell towers." Our engineers had no blueprints, only fear of the gods and the rhythm of the sky. Build the temple on the wrong day, and it will rot. Misalign its axis with the sun, and the sun will wander. Offer the sacrifice at the wrong hour, and the world may fall. Tenochtitlan grew. It was not a settlement. It was a spell made of geometry. Temples aligned to stars. Plazas echoed constellations. Canals mirrored the night sky. The city was a living cosmos, measured to the breath. At its heart stood the temple of Huitzilopochtli, the god who led us here. I was 9 when I first stood atop the great temple. The priest whispered to me, "This is not stone, it is a voice. Speak to it properly, and it will answer. Speak wrong, and something else will." We expanded, built aqueducts, dams, canals. We did not just endure water, we mastered it. And at the core of it all was ritual, not for the people, not for glory, for balance. Tenochtitlan was not a capital. It was an answer to a celestial question, a map of the heavens laid across a swamp. And when the city on water became the temple of a nation, we stopped fearing, and others began to fear us. In the next chapter, I'll show how Tenochtitlan became a blade, and why those who once mocked us now paid in tribute. We didn't plan to become an empire. We just got tired of paying everyone else. When Tenochtitlan was still young, we were subordinates. The city of Azcapotzalco, ruled by the Tepanecs, kept us leashed. We paid tribute, maize, gold, people. They used us as mercenaries. We fought for others. We died for causes not our own. Here are your weapons, Mexica, they told us. Now go, bring us captives. But sometimes the ones we captured were our own. They forbade us from expanding, from building grand temples, from making decisions. We were useful, but never equal. Then came the year their king died. His son, Maxla, wanted more. He declared, the Mexica are no longer allies. They are slaves. But we were no longer the ones crawling through mud. We had walls, we had temples, and most importantly, we had memory. So we did the unexpected. We forged a secret alliance with Texcoco, another humiliated city, and Tlacopan, smaller but proud. 3 against 1. Thus was born the Triple Alliance, 3 cities like 3 teeth, one to bite, one to hold, one to make the world bleed. We rose in rebellion. We crushed Azcapotzalco. We burned Maxla's palace, and on its ashes, we built a throne of our own. Tenochtitlan no longer asked. It commanded. We became the heart of the alliance, and its blade. The Mexica launched what we called the Flower Wars. Campaigns to capture enemies for sacrifice, not for territory. We did not destroy cities. We conquered them, left their rulers in place, but forced them to send yearly tributes of maize, cloth, jade, cocoa, gold, and people. This was not an economy. It was a ritual ecosystem. The empire didn't run on taxes. It ran on fear of time itself. Each victory, a sign of divine approval. Each sacrifice, a debt repaid. Each temple, built from the trembling hearts of the conquered. I became emperor when the empire already stood proud, but not yet watchful. I was a king who could summon 30 nations to kneel, and yet at night I couldn't sleep, because every time the captives were brought, I didn't hear their screams. I heard a whisper in the sky, and when we got used to taking, the sky began taking back. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how the stars stopped obeying, and how the God who once led us suddenly went silent. The scariest sound is not the scream. It's the silence that comes after. We lived by the stars, not out of wonder, but out of fear. Every eclipse was a message, every vanished star a warning. In Tenochtitlan, we had those who didn't count days but cycles, the priest astronomers. Their eyes always bloodshot, not from sleep, but from staring too long at the horizon. I was one of them. Before I was emperor, I knew how long Venus disappeared when a sacrifice must touch the stone to keep the moon from fury. I knew cycles no one was meant to know, and that's why I was the first to notice something was missing. We waited for the Jaguar comet, seen by our ancestors every 52 years. It never came. Then, a solar eclipse that should have lasted moments dragged on for 7 heartbeats too long. Then, the moon, rising with a scar across her face. The priests gathered. They burned copal. They turned the codices page by page and found nothing. We had always trusted the stars to speak, but now, for the first time, they were silent. Into that silence came the omens. People claimed a woman screamed from the lake at night, that a temple began speaking on its own, that flaming stones fell from the sky, that fewer children were being born, and I knew this wasn't fear. It was a missing answer. We lived in a time when the gods had not yet left, but were no longer picking up the call. I spent nights atop the great temple. I made offerings, not to the gods, but to amplify the signal. And always the answer was the same, nothing. And then a light on the horizon, not from the sky, from the sea, something not found in our calendars. And I understood. The silence wasn't a mistake. It was a pause before an answer. We asked the sky, and the sky fell silent, because the answer was already walking toward us. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how an empire prepared for an arrival it didn't yet dare to name. The gods do not whisper without cause, and if even the faithless begin to hear them, something is already on its way. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Something had changed in the air. The flowers in the markets, heavy like dead honey. The feathers, dulled. Even the water in the canals, thicker somehow. I walked the streets of the city. Everything was as it always was, and yet not. Trade moved, songs were sung, women weaved baskets. But the eyes, people stared at the sky not with hope, but with unease. In the temple of Huitzilopochtli, a priest collapsed mid-ritual. When he woke, he remembered nothing, but on the wall beside him, a message had appeared, written in the sacred calendar code known only to timekeepers. It read, "Final cycle." We didn't know what was coming, but something had already arrived. Then came the scouts. They spoke of floating mountains on the eastern sea, of men in shining metal, who ate birds, drank red wine, and feared nothing. Their leader, white-skinned, bearded, and spoke in a voice that did not sound human. Some whispered, "The god Quetzalcoatl has returned," and I, Moctezuma, ruler of Tenochtitlan, did not know, was this a divine joke or the start of the end? We sent envoys with gifts, gold, feathers, cacao, woven cloth. They returned with news. The strangers laughed at the gold. Their leader, Cortez, said he wished to see us, not to bow, not to make peace, to see, a word that chilled my blood, because in our world, to see was to possess. I could not sleep. In dreams, I saw temples burning, goddesses flying through the air like wingless birds, blood pouring into canals, but not ours, theirs. And then he came, to see with his own eyes what we had built for centuries. And we, for the first time, saw a man unafraid of our gods. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about the meeting that was never meant to happen. He arrived, Cortés, with 100 men, horses, cannons, and a face untouched by fear. He had not been stopped by our forests, our poisons, our storms. Nothing delays a man who doesn't read omens. I stood at the entrance of Tenochtitlan, the largest city on the continent, with canals glowing in the morning mist, temples gazing into the sky. I waited, dressed in gold and jade, with everything that might impress a divine visitor, because part of me still wanted to believe he was Quetzalcoatl. When he approached, I extended my hand. He did not kneel. He did not lower his eyes. He smiled. That day, I saw what it meant to face a man who wanted nothing. We led them to the palace, gave them rooms, food, gifts. They looked at it all, not with wonder, but with the curiosity of engineers. Cortés asked questions about everything. Where does your water come from? How do the aqueducts work? How many people gather in this square? Not like a traveler, like a future owner. I realized the city impressed them, but more disturbing, I wanted their approval. That night, I climbed the temple, and I saw one of the Spaniards laughing at our pyramid. He found it flawed, old, strange, and I felt something I should not have felt, doubt. I saw then our power only existed in our own eyes. In theirs, we were an exotic performance. Cortez never touched the gold, but his men looked at it the way hungry men look at bread, and I understood. They did not want gods. They wanted the city. I ordered them watched, but I already knew the script had been lost. I had expected a climax. What I got was a slow unraveling. He did not bring war. He brought temptation. And that was the beginning of our end. In the final chapter, I will tell you how an empire began to vanish, long before it was conquered. People expect empires to fall with thunder, but more often, they simply go quiet. No one declared war. There was no ritual battle, no drums for sacrifice. It all began with silence. Cortez walked through our temples. His men looked at our codices and didn't ask what they said. They asked, "How much does it weigh?" And that's when I understood. We shared no language. We spoke of time. They spoke of price. Our priests offered them rituals. They showed us cannons. I watched my warriors begin to doubt. Men who never feared death now feared what they couldn't understand. How do you fight someone who doesn't fear your gods? The people began to whisper. They said Moctezuma let the strangers in, that this wasn't conquest, but an invitation. I, once a god in flesh, became a suspect, and then, as always in our history, ritual decided everything, but it wasn't ours. One morning, Cortez had me placed under guard. No battle, no revolt. He simply took my authority hostage. I still sat on the throne, but my words no longer echoed. The moment a god falls silent, his world stops existing. Surrounding cities began to rise against us. Former allies turned traitor. Old enemies became foreign allies. The empire I led was not destroyed by the sword. It was consumed by its own doubt. Fire didn't destroy us. Silence did. When Cortez finally left the palace, the city no longer breathed the same. We still stood, but we no longer lived. And I, Moctezuma, last ruler of a world that called itself divine, tell you, we were not defeated. We simply stopped being necessary. Empires don't always die in screams. More often, in whispers of disappointment. We built a city on water, but forgot that water always moves, and it took us with it. This wasn't war yet, just a pause, like a breath before the blow. In part 2, we'll tell the story of how Cortez raised an army, not of Spaniards, but of those we once conquered, how our temples became fortresses, and how Tenochtitlan, a city built on water, sank beneath it. We'll show the fall not just of an empire, but of the belief that our world was the only one. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And let us know in the comments which moment in this story struck you the most. We want to hear your voice amid the silence of the empire that just disappeared.